In a quiet Texas town, a church stood as a beating heart of its community, a sanctuary where prayers were whispered, lives were shared, and trust was sacred. At the center of it all was Pastor Angela Moore, a woman revered for her compassion, fiery sermons, and unwavering dedication to her flock. By her side, Sarah Hill, her loyal secretary, worked tirelessly to support the pastor's mission. Together, they were seen as an unshakable force of faith and friendship. But beneath the surface of this serene picture, something was unraveling. A bond that once seemed unbreakable began to fracture. And when Sarah stepped forward with a shocking revelation, everything changed. Her claim? Pastor Angela Moore had intentionally infected her with herpes simplex virus, a crime so deeply personal, it left the congregation in disbelief. The story that emerged wasn't just one of betrayal. It was a chilling act of revenge rooted in jealousy, fear, and desperation. So what could push a trusted leader of faith to cross such a line? And what secret was so dangerous? It drove her to destroy the life of someone who trusted her the most. Today, we're uncovering the truth behind the act that shattered a church, divided a community, and sent shockwaves far beyond its walls. Before we dive deep into this gripping tale of love, betrayal, and vengeance, like and subscribe for more shocking stories that expose the darkest corners of human relationships. In a quiet Texas town where church was more than just a Sunday ritual, it was the lifeblood of the community. There stood a thriving congregation led by Pastor Angela Moore. To her parishioners, Angela was more than a spiritual leader. She was a guiding light. With her powerful sermons and warm demeanor, she drew people from miles away. She was a beacon of hope, the kind of pastor who always seemed to have the right words to ease your troubles. Her reputation was impeccable, and the church flourished under her leadership. At Angela's side was Sarah Hill, a devoted secretary who worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth running of the church. Sarah was the kind of person you could count on, a single mother juggling her responsibilities at home and her duties at the church with grace. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and fiercely loyal. Sarah knew the church's inner workings better than anyone else, including Angela herself. Together, they formed a partnership that seemed unbreakable, a dynamic duo that kept the congregation thriving. But as close as they appeared on the surface, cracks were forming beneath the polished exterior. Sarah had always admired Angela, trusting her completely, but she couldn't ignore the subtle changes she began to notice. Angela, once warm and approachable, had grown distant. The smile she offered Sarah felt forced, and there were moments of sharpness in her tone that Sarah hadn't heard before. The tension between them grew slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. But in hindsight, Sarah would recall specific moments, small things that didn't seem significant at the time. Like the day she overheard Angela on a phone call, her voice hushed but unmistakably agitated. Or the way Angela started locking her office door more often, something she had never done before. Sarah didn't question it, though. After all, Angela was the pastor, her mentor, her friend. If something was wrong, surely Angela would tell her. But then, something happened that changed everything. It started with a routine bookkeeping task. Sarah was going through the church's financial records, preparing for an upcoming board meeting. She had done this 100 times before, but this time, something didn't add up. A discrepancy in the numbers caught her attention. Small at first, but impossible to ignore the deeper she dug. Sarah, ever the professional, decided to bring it to Angela's attention. She thought it must be a mistake, something they could resolve together. But when she mentioned it to Angela, her reaction was off. Instead of gratitude or concern, Angela grew defensive. She dismissed Sarah's findings, telling her she must have made an error. Sarah felt uneasy but decided to double-check the records. What she found shocked her. The discrepancies weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern. Funds were missing, and the numbers pointed to someone siphoning money from the church's accounts. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the implications. The next time she brought it up, Angela's demeanor changed completely. The warmth Sarah had once relied on was gone, replaced by cold hostility. Angela warned Sarah to drop the matter, insisting it was none of her business. For the first time, Sarah felt a pang of fear. She couldn't understand why Angela was reacting this way. As days turned into weeks, the tension between them became impossible to ignore. Angela began to act differently around Sarah, shorter conversations, sudden outbursts, and, most unsettling of all, a lingering look of something Sarah couldn't quite place. Was it anger? Resentment? Sarah confided in a close friend about what she had discovered, and they encouraged her to go to the church board. But Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to believe that Angela, the woman she had looked up to for so long, could be capable of wrongdoing. She decided to wait, hoping things would somehow resolve themselves. But what Sarah didn't realize was that Angela had already made her decision. Sarah wasn't just a threat to Angela's carefully constructed image. She was an obstacle that needed to be eliminated. It was at this moment that the bond between them, once so strong, completely disintegrated. And neither Sarah nor anyone in the church could have anticipated just how far Angela was willing to go to protect her secrets. I do hope you have subscribed already, as it is about to get really interesting. In 2024, on a Friday afternoon in November, Sarah Hill delivered a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the community. She publicly revealed that Pastor Angela Moore, her close confidant and colleague, had intentionally infected her with herpes simplex virus. The motive, as Sarah claimed, was revenge. Sarah initially believed she had contracted the virus through an unknown means. The symptoms, initially mild, gradually intensified, prompting her to seek medical attention. During the investigation, a chilling truth emerged. The infection stemmed from a deliberate act by the woman she considered a close friend and mentor. The rift between Sarah and Angela had its roots in a hidden truth. They were engaged in a clandestine sexual relationship. Their affair, a carefully guarded secret, began to unravel when Sarah stumbled upon financial discrepancies within the church. These discrepancies, she suspected, were linked to Angela's personal finances. When Sarah confronted Angela with her findings, the pastor reacted with fury and denial. Instead of gratitude for uncovering potential wrongdoing, Angela felt her power and reputation threatened. The revelation of their affair, if exposed, would not only damage their professional standing, but also tarnish the church's image. Fearing exposure and determined to maintain control, Angela concocted a plan for revenge. She knew Sarah's routines, her vulnerabilities, and her life in intimate detail. Their shared history, both personal and professional, provided Angela with the perfect opportunity to execute her plan. Angela invited Sarah to her home under the pretense of discussing church matters privately, a gesture Sarah interpreted as an attempt to mend their fractured relationship. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Angela had meticulously planned every detail of the encounter. During the meeting, Angela subtly introduced a mild sedative into Sarah's drink, impairing her judgment and awareness. Under the guise of intimacy, Angela engaged in sexual activity with Sarah, ensuring the transmission of the virus. Sarah, unaware of the malicious intent behind Angela's actions, began experiencing symptoms weeks later. The realization that her trusted confidant, her lover, had deliberately inflicted this harm upon her was devastating. The physical suffering was compounded by the emotional trauma of betrayal and the shattering of her trust. The investigation revealed a chilling picture of Angela's calculated revenge. This was not a crime of passion. It was a deliberate act of malice designed to destroy Sarah's life, silence a potential threat, and protect Angela's carefully constructed facade. When Sarah Hill filed her complaint, local law enforcement quickly realized this was no ordinary case. The accusations were shocking, and the details were deeply unsettling. What began as a simple health complaint soon spiraled into a complex investigation that would expose the darkness lurking behind the walls of a beloved church. Detective Marcus Reed, the lead investigator on the case, had always respected Pastor Angela Moore. Like many in the town, he had known Angela for years, admired her leadership, and trusted her integrity. The idea that someone so deeply embedded in the community could commit such a vile act was almost incomprehensible. But as the evidence began to mount, Reed knew he had to follow the trail wherever it led, no matter how difficult it was to confront a respected figure in the town. The investigation quickly turned into a methodical search for proof. The first key piece of evidence came in the form of medical records. Sarah's doctors were able to confirm that she had been infected with herpes simplex virus. But even more importantly, they discovered that the strain of the virus Sarah contracted was known to be particularly difficult to transmit casually, meaning it could have only been passed through close, direct contact. This was critical. It suggested that Angela had knowingly exposed herself to the virus and, with full awareness, passed it on to Sarah. Next came a critical breakthrough: text messages and emails between Angela and Sarah that painted a chilling picture. As investigators combed through the digital communications, they found messages from Angela that were laced with veiled threats. The exchanges grew increasingly tense, with Angela warning Sarah to drop the matter of the church's financial discrepancies, even going so far as to subtly insinuate that Sarah might face serious consequences if she persisted in digging into the church's finances. The messages were troubling, especially when one message from Angela read, "You should be careful about who you trust. Some things can't be undone." These texts, along with Sarah's testimony, suggested that the tension between the two women had been building for months before the incident. There was no doubt in the investigators' minds now that Angela was not just angry, she was planning something far more sinister. The case was complicated by the involvement of the church members. Many were reluctant to speak out against a pastor they had known and admired for years. But as investigators interviewed more witnesses, it became clear that the relationship between Angela and Sarah had been deteriorating for some time. Church members noted that Sarah had begun to withdraw from the church activities, and Angela's behavior had grown erratic. The tension between them had been noticeable in the weeks leading up to the incident, though no one had connected the dots until Sarah came forward. Detective Reed struggled with the emotional toll this case was taking on him. He knew how much the church meant to the community, and Angela had always been at the center of it all. It wasn't easy accusing someone so beloved of such a heinous crime, Reed later admitted. But the evidence spoke for itself. It was clear that Sarah was telling the truth. The case moved forward slowly, but with each new discovery, Angela's facade began to crack. What had once seemed like a story of a simple betrayal was turning into something much darker, a cold, calculated act of revenge that had ruined Sarah's life and shattered the community's trust in the church. The turning point in Pastor Angela Moore and Sarah Hill's relationship came when Sarah uncovered something no one expected, a discovery that would set in motion a chain of events that would unravel both women's lives. Sarah, always diligent and attentive to her work as Angela's secretary, had been reviewing the church's financial records as part of routine administrative duties. What she found shocked her to the core. There were significant discrepancies in the accounts, funds that had been misappropriated or, in Sarah's eyes, embezzled. At first, Sarah thought it was a mistake, a simple accounting error. But as she dug deeper, the evidence became undeniable. Angela, the trusted pastor, had been stealing from the very congregation that had supported her for years. It wasn't a small amount. It was enough to cause a scandal. Sarah felt torn. As someone who had dedicated her life to helping others and serving the church, she could not ignore the truth, no matter how painful it was. She confronted Angela with what she had found, hoping for an explanation. Angela's response was not one of remorse or guilt. Instead, she became defensive, furious even. The pastor's once calm and composed demeanor crumbled as she realized that Sarah, her closest ally, now posed a threat to everything she had worked for. Angela tried to convince Sarah to keep quiet, offering assurances that things would be handled quietly. But Sarah, armed with the truth, threatened to go public. She couldn't turn a blind eye to the theft of the funds, knowing the damage it could cause to the church and the community that relied on it. The tension between them escalated, and what had once been a close professional bond now became a bitter confrontation. Angela, fearing exposure and the end of her career, began to view Sarah as a liability. Desperation set in. Angela knew that if Sarah went public with her findings, her entire life, her reputation, and the trust of the congregation would come crashing down. To Angela, there was only one way to stop her, the ultimate act of revenge. It wasn't enough for Angela to silence Sarah through intimidation. Angela wanted to destroy Sarah's credibility, ruin her reputation, and ensure that no one would ever believe her if she spoke out about the church's finances. So Angela concocted a cruel and calculated plan. Using her knowledge of Sarah's vulnerabilities, she exploited the relationship they had once shared to carry out her dark scheme. But Angela's plan wasn't foolproof. Initially, she denied any wrongdoing when law enforcement approached her with accusations. She tried to deflect blame, claiming that Sarah had fabricated the story out of jealousy or misunderstanding. She even went so far as to accuse Sarah of exaggerating the situation to get attention. Angela's attempts to shift the blame onto Sarah only deepened the suspicion surrounding her actions. As the investigation continued, more unsettling revelations emerged. Witnesses came forward, claiming to have noticed signs of tension between the two women in the weeks leading up to the incident. Some reported hearing heated arguments. Others noticed Sarah's increasing anxiety as she began to question Angela's integrity. But the most chilling discovery came when additional victims were identified. Sarah wasn't the only one who had been manipulated and betrayed by Angela. These revelations only added complexity to the case. The church, once a sanctuary for its members, had become a place of fear and distrust. Some congregants refused to believe the accusations against Angela, clinging to the belief that their pastor could do no wrong. They rallied around her, determined to protect her reputation, even in the face of mounting evidence. Others, however, couldn't ignore the facts. They stood by Sarah, demanding justice, and calling for Angela to be held accountable for her actions. The community found itself divided. Longtime church members, some of whom had known Angela for years, struggled to come to terms with the truth. Could their beloved pastor really be capable of such a heinous act? But as the investigation pressed on, it became increasingly clear that Angela's actions were not just about the money. They were about power, control, and a calculated need for vengeance against anyone who dared threaten her carefully constructed world. In the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Angela Moore's defense team fought fiercely to discredit the allegations against her, claiming that the case was based on hearsay and fabrications. They argued that Sarah's accusations were baseless, that the relationship between the two women had been strained, and that Sarah had fabricated a story to exact revenge for personal grievances. Angela herself remained composed, portraying herself as a victim of a smear campaign. But the prosecution presented a case that was impossible to ignore. They had a mountain of damning evidence. Medical records confirming that Sarah had been intentionally infected with a herpes simplex virus, text messages between Angela and Sarah that revealed threatening language and manipulative tactics, and testimonies from witnesses who had seen the growing tension between the two women leading up to the incident. The prosecution also highlighted Angela's prior financial misconduct, using the embezzlement as a motive for her actions. As the trial progressed, it became increasingly clear that Angela's story didn't add up. The evidence was irrefutable. Investigators had pieced together the timeline, showing that Angela had carefully planned and executed her act of revenge. The chilling reality of Angela's actions, the premeditation, the malice, and the betrayal, was laid bare for all to see. In the end, the jury deliberated, and the verdict was announced. Angela Moore was found guilty of aggravated assault, with a sentence that would send a shockwave through the community. The sentence was severe, given the nature of the crime and its lasting impact on Sarah's life. Angela was sentenced to specific penalty, and her fall from grace was complete. The case made headlines across the nation, sparking debates about the abuse of power within religious institutions and the lengths to which individuals would go to protect their secrets. Many in the community, still reeling from the shock of the trial, struggled to reconcile the image of the beloved pastor with the woman who had so callously destroyed another person's life. But for Sarah, the legal victory was bittersweet. While the court had delivered justice, the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. The herpes simplex virus she had contracted from Angela would be with her for life, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered her trust in the person she had once called a friend and mentor. The road to healing was long and difficult for Sarah. She had to rebuild her life from the ground up, finding support from those who believed in her and helped her navigate the aftermath of the trauma. The betrayal had taken its toll on her sense of safety and security, and it would take years before she could fully heal from the emotional scars left by Angela's actions. Dear valued family, don't forget to like and subscribe for more exciting content. This way, you'll stay updated and won't miss our next thrilling story, coming soon. Now let's continue. Though the court case was over, the impact of Angela's cruelty lingered. For Sarah, the journey to healing was far from over. The physical effects of the virus were only one part of the battle. The emotional toll would remain a constant reminder of the price she had paid for uncovering the truth. This case is not just about one pastor and one secretary. It's a story that goes deeper, shedding light on how the bonds of trust can be exploited and manipulated, how power can corrupt even those who are supposed to be our moral guides. Angela Moore, a woman trusted by an entire congregation, used her position to carry out a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty, leaving behind a wake of emotional and physical damage. Sarah Hill, a devoted and hard-working individual. This story is a chilling reminder of how the people we rely on, those who hold positions of power and influence, can use that power for their own gain. What is most haunting is that it took something as severe as a betrayal of Sarah's trust for the truth to emerge. It begs the question, how many others in similar positions have used their influence and trust to manipulate and harm others without anyone knowing? It's easy to believe that those in positions of power and trust are above reproach. But what this case shows is that no one, not even the people who lead us spiritually, is beyond corruption. The emotional damage done is far-reaching, affecting not just the individuals directly involved, but an entire community left to grapple with the aftermath. As the case concludes, one can't help but ask, what does this case say about the lengths people will go to in order to protect their secrets? How do we rebuild trust when it has been shattered so completely, so irreparably? We leave you with these questions to consider. Trust, once broken, is a difficult thing to restore, and for Sarah, it will take years, if ever, to rebuild the pieces of her life that Angela so recklessly destroyed. Now, we turn to you, the audience. What do you think? Was Angela's punishment enough for what she did? And if you were in Sarah's shoes, what would you have done in the face of such betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this shocking case and its broader implications for trust, power, and justice. And if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned for our next case, where we uncover the darker side of human nature.